Hello, everybody. Welcome.
Hello.
Thank you for joining. We're going to get started very, very shortly. One more minute just to give people a time to join us. I will ask you in the meantime if you can silence your mic so that it may not interrupt the discussion. I'd also like to ask you to post your questions in the chat, introduce yourself, especially if you're an IWC member, a Balanced Veteran Network member, or Operation 1620 member. Please introduce yourself. And in one more minute, we'll just get started. All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for a discussion about the ways in which cannabis can help to manage and alleviate common PTS symptoms called Mental Impacts of Cannabis and PTS. It's a collaboration with Balanced Veterans Network and Operation 1620. My name is Amor Montes de Oca. I am the Executive Director at Illinois Women in Cannabis. IWC is a nonprofit that seeks to serve, support, and advance women within the Illinois cannabis industry. As the industry continues to mature, we're using networking, education, mentorship to facilitate opportunities for women who are exploring, connected to, and or employed in the regulated cannabis industry. I am excited to welcome Ron Millward of Balanced Veteran Network to get us started. Hi, Ron. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much, Amor, and thank you to the Illinois Women in Cannabis. We are so incredibly grateful to be doing this, and I think it's just awesome anytime that we can come together, especially with experts, the other folks that are on this panel, and have a conversation about how this is helping our community. It's a win for everyone. So thank you, and everyone for taking the time out. It's amazing. Thank you for being here. I am Ron Millward with Balanced Veterans Network, and we are a 501c3 nonprofit. Our mission is the education, advocacy, and empowerment of alternative therapies for veterans and their families. And we do that through a few areas. Operation 1620 is specifically our cannabis way of doing that. And we do various programs where we get veterans their medical marijuana cards for free. We do veteran meetups, and we've got a thriving peer-to-peer support network for veterans to ask questions about all alternative therapies. And so we are really excited to be here. Caleb Masoner is our executive director. He is hiding on the call, but he's not able to be here. He had an emergency, and it's a bummer that he's not able to be here. But he helped craft a lot of these questions, and we've got Shannon, Sensenig, who is also on our team, is going to be stepping in to help us moderate tonight. But thank you all for being here, and really excited to talk about how cannabis really helps with the PTS symptoms. And, you know, it's completely different for everybody, but it really does help, I think, when we can all share our stories and how it helps, and then to have the science and the experts here to back that. It's really, really a game changer. So thank you all. Shannon, if you'd love to get us started, brother.
Hey, thank you so much, Ron. My name is Shannon Sensenig. I'm a Navy veteran, and I'm part of Balanced Veterans Network. I am the community care and assimilation coordinator, just helping to make sure we take care of our community and help a lot with the background administrative things. But it's real quick, we'll go through and have each of our panelists introduce themselves and how they're connected to IWC and the veteran community and cannabis community. Chloe, do you want to take a moment and introduce yourself?
Thank you, Shannon. My name is Chloé Woods. I'm an attorney here in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm also a member of the current cohort of the Founder Institute, and I was recommended for that program and provided a scholarship for that program through Illinois Women in Cannabis, as I have a cannabis startup that is basically trying to change the experience of people that are new users and give personalized recommendations, really the science behind cannabis and what strains are best for what ailment. So that's called Persona Leaf. I'd love to talk more to you guys about it.
Great, thanks, Chloe. Good luck with that startup. Looking forward to more with that. Next up on my screen, Andrea, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself as well?
Sure. Hi, my name is Andrea Baillo. So I am the Senior Director of Research and Development at Green Thumb Industries. My background is I have a PhD in molecular biology and genetics, and I did cancer research for 6-7 years. Then I joined industry, where I actually went into beer and learned kind of all about more like mechanical skills, and even did a little bit of discovery there. And then I found myself coming back more towards an environment where I could do more discovery and development, where I was fortunate enough to join GTI, and have really been able to be exposed to manufacturing, cultivation, and even retail. And with all of that too, I've been very fortunate to go to a lot of different conferences and get really engaged with the scientific community. So I'm really excited to be able to share what I understand about the application of cannabis in the PTS space.
Wow, that's awesome. Thanks so much for joining us. Next up, we have Stephen Philpott down here. Steve, go ahead and introduce yourself for us.
Hey, thanks everyone. And Amora, thanks for having me. You always put on such great events. So when you asked me, there was no way I was going to tell you no. My name's Steve Philpott. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I actually didn't get into cannabis until maybe a couple of years ago. I'd already had, some curiosities about it, heard some things about it. But in 2020, actually, out of the blue, like so many other people, I got hit with this crazy anxiety. I tried to play it off. I shot artillery in the Marines. Like, I've slept through shooting artillery, and I was like, there's no way something is shaking you right now. But last year kind of changed a lot. And I applied for a medical card here in Illinois. And when I got my card, it told me that I was able to grow plants in my house. But I realized I knew zero about the science of growing this plant in my house. And I knew I wanted to do it the safest way. So long story short, and a bunch of certificates later, I ended up in grad school, and that's where I am now. I'm currently doing my master's thesis on the biosynthesis of secondary metabolites and genetically identical clones grown under varying light spectra. So almost how you can manipulate genetics in clones through exposing them to different light. So I really went from somebody who was anti-cannabis, honestly, growing up, just because I grew up on the South Side and it meant bad things, to a veteran who was looking for help, to now I've worked for PharmaCann and a bunch of different companies. I actually know more because we both sit on the Cannabis Advisory Council for one of the local community colleges. So yeah, that's kind of my quick spiel.
Awesome, Semper Fi. Well, I was a corpsman, so I'm glad to know you're not one of the crayon eaters. And finally, on our panel here, Julia Thompson. Although the name says Ron Millward, it's definitely Julia down there was having some technical difficulties joining us today. But Julia, take a moment to introduce yourself and how you're in the veteran and cannabis community.
Hey guys, so I thank you, Ron, and everybody for being here. I think it's super awesome that we have platforms available to us now to kind of get our stories out there. I am an Army vet. I was in Iraq 2005 to 2006. I was 21. My mom is a retired LA County sheriff during the 80s, 90s. So I definitely was never introduced to any type of cannabis. It wasn't until I got back from Iraq that I really started seeing a lot of problems that were developing that I felt at the time medication really wasn't helping me with. So being in California, from California, it was definitely beneficial to me to be in a state that allowed us a lot more freedoms when it came to plant-based medicine, to just kind of fill out and see what I could do for myself. So I've been in the industry now, the cannabis space, for since 2008, actually, when I retired, and it's made a huge impact on my life. So super happy to be here.
All right, great. Well, thank you to each of our panelists and for everyone who's joining us there. We have a list of questions that we'll try and get through as many of we can, and then also touch on some other points that some of our panelists wanted to talk about. The first question that I wanted to ask is, how can we advance our access for veterans wanting to use cannabis? Ron, do you want to take a shot at this one?
Yeah, absolutely. So what was the question of veterans wanting to use cannabis? I'm sorry.
How can we advance access for veterans wanting to use cannabis?
Yeah,
Can be some barriers to get over?
well, there are a lot of barriers. I think what the unfortunate part is, every state has different laws around cannabis, and we every single day in our community have veterans reaching out in states that are not able to access it and are struggling. And there's really not a whole lot that we can do other than to fight harder on our advocacy efforts. And so I really do believe that there's a lot of power in our stories and being able to empower veterans to be able to know that it's not intimidating to go to your local representatives and officials and to have conversations with them, to be able to tell them stories about what is helping other veterans, to be able to educate them. And because I believe that, there's been a stigma for years that's been built up, and there are some folks that just don't see it and they won't understand it. But sometimes when you're able to tell that story, we're able to advance that forward. And so one of the bigger parts of what we do in our organization is to really try to get out there. For me personally, I try to meet with all of our representatives and have conversations around alternative therapies that can help. And then to show up when you plug into other organizations like Illinois Women in Cannabis, and there are like normal organizations and some other folks that come along to actually do the advocacy work. Go to those meetings, and show up and have your voice be heard to be able to be in these conversations. I think that it's important, and really that advocacy effort I feel is missing, because we see a lot of complaining. People are like, I don't have cannabis, or the laws aren't good enough, or they're not this. But then when we have, the days where we can go and voice that and the votes happen, there's not a lot of people showing up. There's not a lot of people that are voicing that in person and pushing that. So I really want to try to make that a less intimidating thing, and to really empower veterans to have the language around that. We're trying to work on different points for people to talk to politicians about that can help them, because some folks struggle in that communication. It can be a little bit intimidating. But I really think that, on a larger scale, there's a lot of talk with the VA and different people. And we just had that bill that was not going through for the VA to be able to recommend. And so there's still a long way for us to go without a larger declassification, a descheduling of this. And who knows when that would happen. But I really think that we need to keep telling our stories. And the access part, like in every state, like Stephen, you're able to cultivate in your state, and where in my state I'm not able to, and it's an extremely expensive thing for people to get into this program and then to be able to maintain the level of medicating. And so continuing to voice that and being able to maybe create change, like having the folks that we have on this panel and this conversation, and the people that are listening, to hear us really talk about this in a way that how it's helping and changing people's lives, and it's become a tool in people's lives to live a better quality of life. It can help us make bigger change in some of these orgs.
Great, thanks, Ron. And Ron or Julia, what have been some of the biggest challenges that you've experienced, or stories that you've heard from other veterans as far as gaining access to using cannabis as medication at the current moment? What are some of those biggest challenges?
I mean, I think a lot of the things that we deal with are mental health, and talking openly with our providers about what we're doing, and honestly, them not knowing a lot about this stuff is really hard too. So I think for me, I've heard a lot of people just really scared. And this is not something we should be scared of. This is something we should be embracing. People are getting healed from this. People are getting better from this. And I try to always communicate to veterans, the more you talk about it, the less foreign it's going to be to a lot of people. And we are stronger in numbers. And the more people, I think veterans, we lead the way, because we do have a lot of issues and problems and things, PTS, one of them, but so many other things, just because, I mean, it's hard to say this, but I think a lot of people see veterans with disabilities as just being veterans who are amputees. We don't talk a lot about TBI and PTS because it's injuries that really are invisible. So I think the more that we talk about alternative healing and things like this that are just to make it more common, especially in the medical place and just in the VA, I know it's scary for a lot of people, but the more we talk about it, I think the more leeway we're going to make and the more other people are going to feel comfortable about coming out of the cannabis closet or the green closet. And especially a lot of women who are moms. I mean, it is very hard to have somebody come out and say that they're using something, maybe if it isn't legal in their state, and being scared about things like that. So I just feel like, you know, we can't really protect each other until we get more education and talk more about it. And then we'll be able to get more laws put in place where, you know, we'll actually have more access to this stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, there's definitely the stigma around cannabis use, and you expressed, you know, being a mom using cannabis. You know, I've yet to experience a cannabis user who's neglected their kids, but, you know, alcohol is legal. You know, prescription narcotic over prescription is legal, but definitely have seen the negative side effects there. And PTS, you know, isn't just for veterans, but it seems like veterans are leading the push towards cannabis use for PTS, traumatic brain injuries, you know, the PTS from, you know, whether it's military sexual trauma or whatever the combat experiences that they had. I know, Chloé, you had brought up earlier before the session started, there was a bill that just went up for vote that the VA kind of oppressed, and it was to allow the VA to study cannabis use for PTS. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, in that instance, they basically provided written testimony opposing the bill, saying that it was redundant and that the VA is already doing that. So although the policy is still that it's Schedule 1, I think part of one question I was going to actually ask for Ron is, when you have veterans reaching out, is part of the stigma or the fear of wanting to try cannabis for wellness about their benefits, right? Is it them not knowing, kind of an education piece of not knowing whether or not it will negatively affect their benefits or disqualify them from benefits? And the VA's policy currently is that it will not. And they actually, like, they can't, although the VA doctors cannot recommend cannabis, they can record that you're using it. It's still protected, like HIPAA, like private confidential information. And they can incorporate that so that other physicians can review it and see and know that's part of your plan of care. So I think part of it, like in terms of obstacles for veterans, it's just knowing that they're not going to be negatively or adversely affected in terms of their benefits for exploring cannabis as a wellness option as well.
Yeah, that's an incredible point. And, you know, we see a spectrum from different states and folks that reach out. And for me personally here in Pennsylvania, I openly speak about that because I feel like I want that to be incorporated in my entire well-being, my whole care plan. Like, this is what I use for all of these things. And I've replaced so many pharmaceuticals with that. So I want to be open because I want to be healthy. And, you know, but the problem that I see is there are some states that, while you won't lose your benefits, there are people that are being deemed as cannabis use disorder, and they are taken off of certain pharmaceuticals and things that, like, they need, you know, to function. And just because they disclose that they are a patient or they use that, they'll start to taper them off of some of these things. And without really having the education to realize that it's not like a fix-all, it's not going to change everything. You know, there needs to be some more education on the healthy use and a little bit more understanding of the endocannabinoid system and all of the compound. It's just so much more complex than, yeah, it's cannabis. And we all, you know, we know that, but anyway.
Yeah, I'll echo that too, because like one thing that's still not happening, it's so shocking since 2021, is there's hardly any education even in school. So like when people are becoming doctors or nurses, the education piece around the endocannabinoid system is very small. It's increased. Like when I was in grad school, I think we spent like 10 minutes of a 2-hour day on neurobiology talking about endocannabinoids. So like that's a huge part of it too, is like being vocal from regulatory standpoints, and like also like right now there are actually universities, the DePaul University is looking at starting a program. The University of Maryland has a program for medical cannabis master's programs where people actually like are learning. It's not totally all about how the cannabinoids work, but we're still getting integrated into academia, which I think is going to be really huge to get the education out to the people who are servicing veterans.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, especially from a pharmacist standpoint, there's many who don't have the education behind it and just know it as, you know, the devil's lettuce from back when they were growing up. But Ron introduced me to a guy named Mike, who's a pharmacist and like has gone on to seek out additional training and education on the endocannabinoid system and how cannabis can really help, and takes the time to listen to your whole medical history and all the medications that you're on to figure out, do you need more CBD, THC for your symptoms, and what interactions you might have with your other medications. So yeah, I definitely see that working in the healthcare system, that there is a huge gap in the education there for our providers, and something also that needs to be addressed. Steve, talking about challenges for veterans wanting to use cannabis, Stephen, you mentioned that you were able to start growing, but didn't really know what to do and wanted to do it the right way. Where did you go, or where did you find your information then to start cultivating on your own?
Yeah, so my undergrad is in kinesiology. So I went to UIC, big research school. So they kind of teach us like, don't really believe any articles you read online, like go try to find research journals. And I found kind of this gap in research of actual cultivation of cannabis or hemp or anything. So I think I went to like Trichome Institute, which they do like really good in-depth classes that they teach online. But the more I went online, there was still a gap in the knowledge. One thing I was thinking kind of as we were just speaking, knowing how opioid use, alcohol dependency affect a specific population, and for us being that specific population, the same way we give a lot of anti-propaganda to stuff, we should be very specifically to our veterans, giving them these options. We shouldn't be like dangling it back here and making the veteran go look for it. Anybody who's active duty right now they should kind of be given a heads up, like, hey, if you start feeling like ABC and you start feeling like this, enough of our fallen soldiers, enough of us are currently going through it, where we should be talking to people about it before they even go through it. It's almost like it's a heads up. So we have to reverse that propaganda, because I saw a lot of good Marines get kicked out because they were using cannabis. And to know now that they may have actually been using that to treat themselves, and having also lost people in that same unit who we did lose to PTSD, at this point, it's kind of like, hey, no, it needs to happen now. Nobody's asking anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely have heard similar stories of, shipmates of mine who were treating symptoms, because you're not allowed to go to medical. It takes away from unit productivity. You're taking away hours to go to medical and just get out of work. And we are losing veterans. We are losing active duty to suicide and to all the other bad side effects of what we've experienced. Julia, you had something you wanted to share?
Yeah, actually, I just echoing on that, Stephen, I ended up getting a grant from In-Home Harvest and Battle Brothers Foundation and the Veterans Canada Coalition. And it actually happened last January, which was kind of weird that it happened. But it was like, the grant, I don't know how much it was valued at, but they came and set up grow inside of my house. Obviously, it's legal here, but it was huge for me, because obviously we all know when COVID happened, the world stopped, and I don't have any kids. So for me, it was like, my growth just stopped. But having these plants and seeing them grow every day was like a little sense of accomplishment that was just priceless for me. And then I learned on my own, and then it was like, then I felt confident about myself again. Like, I'm capable of giving life almost, and creating these beautiful things. And I think that should be, it's not just about, the medicinal benefits, but it's about honestly, like overall health. And Ron is huge. He's a plant dad. We all know that. Like, that's all he posts is plant dad stuff. So it's awesome just to see plants growing and knowing that we're facilitating that growth when we've been surrounded by so much death and so much sad stuff and so much just trauma, that it's like, what else can kind of change trauma around his life, really? And like, knowing that you're capable of kind of facilitating this growth and fostering this plant, that it was so huge for me. And I tell people about it all the time, because I'm like, there is resources out there, and to a lot of veterans, they don't have it in their state. But it should be, of anybody that should be able to at least heal themselves, It's like, I feel like people who have been in the military, especially people who have PTS, PTSD, TBI, things like that. If you haven't been there, you can't tell me how to heal myself. And I just think this is something that it takes us back to the basic things of life, like the basic building blocks of life, of like watering a plant, watching it grow, giving it love. It like reintroduces basic things to us that we need to learn again almost.
Hey, and like while we're talking about cultivating, because it's a hot button item for me, because while you say I've got plants, I'm not allowed to cultivate cannabis, and that's tough for me because it's tough for me to access. And so like while we have some folks here, executives, things like that, I want to make it known, like even though there's a place for that cultivation, I am sure the sales in Illinois is still amazing, and that people are still going to go to the medical market and purchase that product. Like it's difficult. Like it's difficult to cultivate the quality that you guys are producing. And I think that there's a place for everyone. While there's this therapeutic aspect to cultivating, I would still always go and get great concentrates and other things. And so I believe that, I'm not saying that there's anyone lobbying against it, but if there were people that could believe in us, these bigger, larger corporations, and be like, man, we see that this is such a powerful tool that helps veterans, and we're able to lobby for us, maybe help push that a little bit more and say, hey, this would be a great idea to have some folks be able to have this as a therapy. It's not a threat, it's a therapy. And I think that, man, I'm praying for the day that I'm able to have that in my life. Anyway, I'm going to move off of that, but it's a big thing.
Right. And, the advocacy, I think, really needs to extend beyond just veterans advocating for it, because there are a whole host of symptoms, not just PTS that cannabis treats, but, all the other approved medical diagnoses where someone can get their medical marijuana card for, whether, especially with PTS, it's the intrusive memories from a traumatic experience, whether that's combat or, there are experiences that civilians have that can result in PTS. The
military training alone, brother, I don't mean to interrupt you, but it's not just veterans. All of us are struggling with that, and it's so relevant for everyone.
Yeah. For anyone on the panel here who is a cannabis user, what are some of the symptoms that cannabis helps you with, and how does cannabis help you in your life? Whoever wants to start off. Ron, take it away.
I don't want to be the only one blabbing my mouth here. Cannabis has really, really helped me, but my relationship with it has changed. I was thinking about this today before this panel, because I want to be intentional about what I say. We've been talking about cannabis for a while, but then I believe that in the very beginning of our organization, we were like, straight up cannabis, that's it, cannabis, cannabis, cannabis. And really, we're balanced veterans, right? So like it's about a healthy use with the plant. And sometimes, it's necessary to incorporate other things that are very important to work synergistically with cannabis. It can create so I learned a lot from the very beginning of our organization to where we are now. I learned that, being able to use other things instead of cannabis to down regulate myself now. But in the very beginning, cannabis was all that I had. So it was all that I used, and I was using it a lot heavier than I do now. And so my relationship with that has changed. And I think that that's important for people to know. Like going into it, there are folks that are in our community that just use CBD or, other products that don't ever touch THC. There are folks that are, consuming a ton all day long, and there's nothing wrong with any of that. But I think when you're able to get with yourself and understand why you're medicating and really start to figure out those things. But so for me, like my anxiety was really big. Like I am on guard a ton, and everywhere that I go, I was hit by an IED. And so when I'm driving, I am like just a mess. I'm anxious, and CBD and some of the other cannabinoids have really helped me to be more calm when I'm driving. And so it's something that I've learned to incorporate into my life. But then right there, technically I have this in my system while I'm operating a vehicle. And it's, if I were to, get pulled over, I'm going to prison. Yet, if I were taking the pharmaceuticals that they gave me, I wouldn't. It'd be fine. I was whatever. And so I think that it's tough because I still feel wrong at times for using this plant, you know, in ways that genuinely help me have a better quality of life and live. So we're still trying to figure all that out, but it really helps me with just my responses. You know, I feel as though, I don't know why, but my reaction time is just, it's really quick, and I don't have a buffer. And sometimes cannabis creates that buffer for me to be able to respond a little more peaceful, a little more calm, and not so up at 100 sometimes. So that would be the biggest for me. There's plenty of other things, insomnia, my sleep, and a lot of the chronic pain, but really that day to day, that like helping me navigate my life and have a better quality of life has been huge.
Thanks for sharing, Ron. Julia, you started touching on this, and I know from the big program mission for Balanced Veterans, but talking about like growing a plant, Steven's able to cultivate, and Ron is a plant dad through and through. If you could see the rest of his house, there's more green than any other color around. But Julia, in your experience, what other alternatives to pharmaceuticals are there for veterans and anyone suffering with PTS who are looking to heal?
I think honestly, as in the beginning of my pharmaceutical journey, that I would like to call it, it was just, there was a lot of blame put on me for taking the medication. I think a lot of people don't understand, like with the VA and just certain rules that there are. And yes, it's healthcare, but who protects you from your doctor kind of a situation. I know that right when I got back from Iraq, they put me on Ambien and Wellbutrin, and I was on Ambien for 7 years. There's so many different ways to use cannabis. And I think what, Ron too, what he was saying to kind of piggyback on that is like, I think for us, it's just gaining back control of our lives, which is why occupational therapy is huge in the VA, because they want to teach you how to live your life again. And living your life is not waking up and taking 15 to 20 pills in the morning to wake up, or taking 15 pills at night to go to sleep. That's not living your life. You're really just doing what you have to do to get by. And there is no light at the end of the tunnel with a lot of these medications. It's not like you have the flu. It's not an antibiotic. It's an antidepressant. So I think for me, just knowing that tomorrow, if I wake up and I'm feeling great, I don't have to medicate. Or maybe I might medicate a little bit, or maybe the next day I might medicate a little bit more, but just being able to feel my emotions, being able to feel like you have to be able to feel yourself again and feel your feelings and know like, I'm not heading to a good place, because when you're on a lot of these medications, you don't see things like that coming because, you have all these chemicals in your system. So I think for me, too, now we're kind of coming into the realm of psychedelics. There's a lot of veterans that are utilizing these things. And it's just, I don't understand how or why people are so scared of things that come from the earth as opposed to things that are man-made. Like I've been on almost every single one of the drugs that you could possibly be on. And of course, that can't be healthy for any young person, not just a man, but a woman. I mean, we haven't had a lot of women coming back from combat or just coming out of the military. Now we have a lot more, and we have, it's like, I was Steven, we have to, like, it's not a maybe or should we, it's like, we have to start looking into these options, because at no point in time when I've been on cannabis have I thought like, I don't want to be here anymore. But these other medications, you just don't know, and they're not giving us hope. They're just getting us by. Like I constantly tell people, homelessness is a form of suicide. You're not surviving. You're not succeeding. You're barely thriving. You're barely getting by, like you're just literally waiting until that day comes. And that's what veterans need. We need a sense of hope. We need that second breath. We're running a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Yikes, lost the connection.
Hopefully we'll reconnect here, but we'll move on to next question here. What are some of the most critical changes that we need to make to face our future effectively when it comes to cannabis and cannabis use? Anyone want to take a stab at this one?
Well, I guess I will. One thing that I've often thought about is the same way that like I feel veterans are to this cannabis movement what like African American community, the Black community was to the civil rights movement. So it's going to be this group of people who will be on the forefront, this group of people who will make it better for everyone, right? Like once all the changes are made and once the realization of the benefits are there, it's going to make it better for everyone. So yes, the VA is already doing some studies to look at veterans and PTS, but I think what we also need to be looking at, and maybe this happens outside of the VA, is the comorbidities and kind of contraindicators. And I know Andrea might be able to talk a little bit more about that science, but once we have that information, I feel like it gets a lot harder for people to continue to say that this is dangerous, right? So there's a knowledge gap, there's some information that we still need as to like this already we know this improves anxiety and lots of conditions, right? Like Alzheimer's, epilepsy, HIV, Crohn's syndrome. So there's seizures, a lot of things that it already is improving, but we need to know how this interacts with the existing, you know, pharmaceutical market. And I think once we can kind of answer some of those questions and not completely try to reinvent how this country has been doing healthcare, I think that's where people are afraid. They're afraid right there. They're afraid of us like kind of replacing what's been going on. And instead of replacing it, maybe we start with saying, this is how they work in tandem, this is how they affect one another. And then we kind of gradually go from there to be able to make some more traction and gain some inroads with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Chloe, for those points. Something that Stephen brought up earlier was kind of legalizing marijuana, making it more accessible. You know, doesn't just gain access to it and for this medicine, but it can also open up a lot of jobs that can be created for vets and especially homeless veterans. Stephen, do you want to talk on that a little bit?
Yeah, so it's kind of just what we touched on earlier, just as far as sometimes something as simple as growing a plant. I think there are a lot of research papers that are actually showing like people who spend time around plants more have a generally better mood. So when you're talking about something that may be, I heard somebody use the term a quadrillion-dollar industry, you're talking about a quadrillion-dollar worth of jobs, and I choose my message very carefully, but I mean what I say and I say what I mean. I think as veterans, we have to just be more comfortable getting messages directly across. Like 5 seconds of being uncomfortable makes a really good point. But there's no way that there should be any homeless veterans in the United States of America. That's just like one sentence. As much as we scream, we support the troops. It bothers me a lot when I hear that sentence. And a lot of other troops it does as well. Because I live in Chicago, one of the largest cities in the United States. And we have a tent camp of homeless veterans. And at the same time, in 1 year, in 6 months, over $1.6 billion was made in the first year and 6 months of legalization here. So my thing is just, if we're gonna keep saying support the troops and have this, you know, this money being made from cannabis while we are waiting to be healed from it, those jobs should be for veterans. Just straight up, just those cultivation jobs, trimming jobs. It's a very, even the task of just going through it, it's a very strict field. And what I've realized I was an agent in charge at a dispensary here in Chicago. People who are in the military do very, 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 very well in very strict fields. I kind of felt like I was in an armory because I worked in a cage in a dispensary, and we had these rules that 2 doors couldn't be open at the same time. Things as simple as that, give that to veterans. Like, you know what I mean? It's a very easy conversation at this point, and we're kind of like, we've been waiting. And now I'm saying it, like, give it to veterans at this point. They deserve those jobs.
Wow, thanks. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think it is a perfect job for veterans. You have gone from that strict military regiment to an industry where it does take that type of control, not just to make it safe and control the access to it, but you know, the more you follow the rules, the better product you're going to have as far as quality control type of deal. And this kind of goes to anyone that can share on it, but who is making the greatest advancement for veterans in the cannabis space, and how are they doing that?
I would actually like to shout out AmVets. Stephen was on that panel yesterday, and I'll tell you what, I don't think I've ever seen such an eclectic group of people together, educating people on cannabis. And so I think that's incredible. And there are a lot of organizations around the nation that are doing good things. I just want to see people work together. Like there's no ego here. Like we just want to fucking save our brothers and sisters. I'm sorry, excuse my language. Very passionate about this. Like I've lost 13 brothers and sisters to suicide, and just recently, 3 weeks ago, and was the most recent. And it's just not getting easier. It's not getting better. And I believe that this is a way to really help. And it's not the answer. It's not going to solve it all. And that's obviously why I believe our organization is in other areas and doing other things, because we really need to be balanced. And there's got to be other aspects of our lives that have to come together and start moving in a better direction. You can't just consume cannabis and expect everything to get better. There's a lot of other auxiliary. I believe that cannabis is that tool to help get you to a more level state to be able to incorporate some of those other healthier practices and lifestyles. But yeah, this is just a really tough conversation, and I know that all of the veterans here, that we're all affected by it. And it's not even, I can't stand seeing the vets, and I've seen a lot of them that are like stuck in their houses still, that are not able to like live, like go outside, that are like, it's just, there's such a spectrum here. And then you've got the folks that are homeless. And so really being able to just care, the cannabis community can, and we are, look at what we're doing right now. I mean, thank you to Illinois Women in Cannabis and GTI and Incredibles and Dog Walkers and all the folks that believe in us, that are like, hey, we believe in you, and we're going to put this panel on and we're going to have a conversation about it. And listen, all of you that are still here listening, thank you. Like, this is how we create that change. And so those are the organizations that I think are doing good things, the ones that believe in us, that see that we're genuinely trying to take good steps. And it's not like it's, me and a couple people. We've got a community of people that are making decisions for the veteran community, and we just want to see our own quality of life get better. I am struggling and daily struggling, no matter how put together we look or how great the org looks. Like, that's a reality, as our leadership is going through it, and we're all healing together. But man, I'll tell you what, they're the most passionate people that I have ever in my lifetime, and even working in the church world, have worked with, because we have a genuine, deep desire to help our brothers and sisters. And so any org that really genuinely says, hey, we support veterans, do it big. Like, whatever you can do, strategize with your teams. If you can help, then help, because we need the help. And all of them do. There are great orgs in all of the states doing things. So just find out where you can help, and the conversation is where it starts.
Yeah, absolutely. And, from volunteering with Balanced Veterans, we've been at festivals and we have these, big companies come in like, oh, we want to support you. How do we get involved with you? And then you come to find out they just want you to refer people to their business to buy cannabis from their dispensary or whatever, and really don't want to partner. I think Stephen's idea is great, of getting homeless vets and getting vets into the industry to do those jobs. Looking at it from kind of the business perspective, Andrea, I think you have a lot of experience with GTI. How do you see veterans being able to help the industry?
Sorry, so you're asking how veterans help the industry, or how we're helping the veteran?
Well, both. How are you helping veterans, and how do you think veterans can, be a part and help your industry as well?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I kind of come at it from like a scientific approach. Like, one thing that's happening that's very exciting right now, that will change and is going to impact what's happening here, is there's like a company called Radical Science, and they're actually the first company that is taking on the endeavor of doing double-blind randomized clinical trials. I find this incredibly revolutionary for our space. It's already been so difficult to work with universities and get more access to even equipment. If I want to make, run something, I don't have the equipment that a university would have. And anyway, the access to humans that can do these trials and do them in a way that you would find in a real clinical trial in, let's say, a cancer treatment regimen. It's really going to make a huge impact. It's only just starting, and they just released their first paper showing that CBD over prolonged periods of time does decrease anxiety. So that's like one thing I really did want to share today too at some point was that, and maybe I'll be late, well, I'm just doing now, is that we're starting to learn that it's not just about, and it shouldn't be a surprise, but it's not just about having it for the acute effects, but like really we can, if you use a real good regimen where you're engaging your endocannabinoid system, you can actually start to see long-term effects. It's not going to happen overnight necessarily. Like, yes, sometimes THC and some of those more psychoactive cannabinoids like Delta-8, those can cause some immediate effects that you notice a change in, but there's these minor cannabinoids that we're starting to do research on that really have this great opportunity to really change how you can expose yourself long-term and engage your system that naturally is in your body to decrease anxiety, to help relieve, some of the symptoms from PTS, such as memory consolidation or memory retention and consolidation processes. So anyways, I kind of just talked about that one company. There's also one other thing, I guess, that's really exciting is increasing bioavailability. So cannabinoids generally don't really do that well in your body. They break down, they get metabolized, and you have very low amounts that actually reach your brain. So lots of companies are starting to develop technology that'll increase that bioavailability. And so you can use less and get more.
Awesome, that's great. Question out here, what do you think the best outcome for veterans who want to use cannabis as part of their healing? What would that look like, and for veterans who want to heal?
I mean, I feel like the more we kind of put ourselves out there, the better it's going to be, because people are going to see our faces, the more we link our Instagrams, and then maybe they'll feel not as threatened by reaching out to us and asking us for help. From like a scientific perspective, we know what the long-term effects of Ambien are, memory loss, like all these terrible things. I'm willing to take my shot, on trying new things at this point. But for me too, I think with the VA, when it comes to certain things, there haven't been any tests done on pregnant women and a lot of these drugs that they have us on for PTS. And it's really scary, and it's hard to think like, how are we going to have a future if we can't deal with the present? I think the VA, I don't think we'll ever be able to do any kind of tests to see what the effects of what they're giving us now are doing to us, because a lot of people don't want to know. So I think the more that we put ourselves out there, we become advocates, the more the movement gets bigger, then people are going to be reaching out more, and then they become our allies. I mean, for me and Ron, we met a few years ago, and it was just by us being ourselves, being genuine, and really talking to each other about, like he said, like hard topics, or like Steven said, 5 seconds of uncomfortableness. I mean, we've already sacrificed ourselves once. Like, I'm willing to sacrifice myself again for the cause and for the better now of what we have. We're on the up and up. We know what's going on, so I always tell veterans it's our responsibility. Yes, we went to war, but it's still our responsibility to be there for our veterans who don't know how to have those conversations. And I think we can start seeing people who are kind of interested, that they'll ask certain kinds of questions for us to bring up the conversation, and just being more open, I think, is like a huge thing. I know we want to protect ourselves, but I feel like we don't have that much else left to lose at this point. So.
Thanks for sharing, Julia.
I'd like to take a stab at that as well. I mean, I think the best outcome for veterans who want to use cannabis to heal is for Congress to remove it from Schedule I and not make it federally illegal. So that's the best outcome, right? That's the first place we start. And then kind of looking at not just veteran groups, but veteran groups with strange bedfellows. How do we find synergy with other groups that might get behind this and also want to have it legalized? And maybe that means it's a veteran group that's partnering with some libertarian group who's all about the taxation part of it, or there's some group who wants to use the income or the additional state income in order to do public works projects. So kind of looking for those synergies, and that you might not have, like, off the initial glance said, this makes sense. But if you kind of start thinking about what is our ultimate objective, and the ultimate objective is for this to not be federally illegal, let's find some of those groups, those strange bedfellows, where we can also like advocate together from different angles.
That's awesome. I think that's great. And I think you're right. That's really what it's going to take is, collectively different groups and getting together and working together with Synergy to make things happen and to get it decriminalized. Stephen, go ahead. You have your hand raised there.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think the best outcome for our veterans, and this is another one of those like 5 seconds of being uncomfortable, but many of us don't walk around with the same pride that we did when we had a uniform on. And a lot of civilians may not understand how many veterans they even walk past every day because of the inflammatory rhetoric that is kind of preached throughout our society, I guess. When you're being like rude to somebody out, people don't realize how many times they're being rude to a veteran out in public. And it is a simple thing as far as a societal norm, as far as a conversation. I bring all that up to say the best possible outcome to me is that we can stop making PTSD one of these things where it's just like, oh, my cousin went to war and yeah, he's weird now. And it can be one of those things where it's just like, hey, we as an American society have asked a duty for these people. And we as an American society need to chill out a little bit and kind of understand that when these people come back, they're just asking for assistance. It's not even, it's not a 1-for-1 swap, trust me. You know what I mean? These people who have served, I've lost 2 friends really, really, really close to me and saw someone who I really respected kicked out the military for using alcohol. And we're not winning. And there's a chance for people to help us. So I say all that to say the best possible outcome is our entire society can chill out a little bit because this inflammatory rhetoric that's preached isn't very good for veterans, whether you have PTSD or not. And it kind of creates new PTSD in people who may not have had it. Just because now there is this inflammatory stuff going on in the streets, our country really needs to dial it down a little bit and kind of see that veterans are not trying to, you know what I mean? Everybody thinks that this war is part of being a veteran, but that's something a lot of people are trying to put behind them. And when your streets look like war, it also doesn't help. So I think descheduling, like Chloe said, us getting behind the movement together, working with these big companies who are, kind of working, from the top down, that can kind of change how our society totally looks and how we treat veterans and have veterans walking around with a sense of pride leading our society instead of us having to kind of feel, like we're ducking and dodging on edge all the time.
Man, thank you for saying that. Oh my goodness. I think that, in Hollywood accentuates this as well. Every single movie you see that's with a veteran, they're messed up and they're crazy and they're waving a gun around and they're whatever. And, there's a lot of times I'll tell people I have PTSD and like, I literally this weekend, I was with this group of persons. She's like, you like just seem really scary, and I'm like, what? Sorry, just trying to exist and go through our things, changing that narrative around who the veteran is. And really, as far as our organization, Balanced Veterans, I saw a need to represent the plant well in the community. Whereas there's no wrong way to medicate. I genuinely believe that all cannabis use is medical. I mean, call it recreational, whatever you want to call it, but like we're sometimes self-medicating for things. And really being able to represent that well, like we're not the group that's going to go, and there is nothing wrong with how this happened. We're not going to go rip bongs on the Capitol steps and demand our medicine. I mean, there's just a professional way, I think, to approach it. We're all here having a beautiful conversation, being able to intelligently talk about the different ways that it does help our community. And yes, there's a lot that needs to change in even just local legislation. We had a bill that died here in Pennsylvania just this week that was for home cultivation. They didn't even talk about it. Everything got blocked and pulled out of it. And so at least having these conversations and being able to listen to educate more, because I still believe that it's an education thing. It's folks that just don't want to hear it yet. And as soon as they do want to hear it a different way, or it hits their family, or something along that line, then they're like, wow, this actually works, and I'm going to listen to this now. And we hear that story time and time again. So I think the more education that happens, that's all our organization ever wanted to do, was just educate, like give people resources and an area to come and ask questions and not feel weird about what you're using to heal, and to feel comfortable and to not feel ostracized, and be able to talk about all the weirdness that sometimes happens with PTS. Like I'm weird sometimes, and I think that, that's okay, because we're also productive and loving, and we're here I want to be better. I want to genuinely help the human kind, like that's what I'm here to do. We chose to protect and serve, and I never stopped. And every other veteran is the same way. I think a lot of times we get so far removed from that identity, and we're like, whoa, like I don't even know how to. Like a lot of folks do not know how to be a civilian or be in the society, because we just feel uncomfortable and different. And come over and talk to us. Folks that aren't veterans, we're very friendly. I promise you, once you get down to the core of it, like we're just trying to figure it out. No one's telling us. The government's definitely not helping us. So we're here trying to figure it out. And I promise you, every day we see hundreds of conversations of veterans having conversations about, how does this help? What is that? Never heard of that. What's this? Let's try that. What's that? And I think that is the beauty of like genuinely, healing each other through conversation. What helped you? What helped me? And it's a beautiful thing. Thank you for saying that, Stephen. That's like the most important thing I think out of this whole thing, is like, we're here. We're okay. We need your help.
Yeah, I saw something the other day. Everyone's ready to send off these boys and girls to war, but they're not prepared to take care of the men and women who come back. And the things that can be done. And yeah, I mean, Hollywood doesn't help it. Everyone just assumes that, when you're in uniform, hey, let me buy you dinner. Like, man, love you, support America. And you're a veteran, like, man, that dude's crazy. He just likes guns and drinking and type of deal. And I promise we're not all like that, especially if we ever cannabis. Give us our medicine. We're getting close to the end here, and I want some time to be able to ask questions. But anyone on the panel, real quick, before we jump to opening up for questions, is there something that you're doing or something in your industry that you want to, throw out there, cannabis related or, veteran related? Anyone want to share real quick?
I will. I know Hillary, I think we saw her say, mention something about a big cause of PTSD is sexual assault. In the military, we're dealing a lot with that right now. Me and Ron both have, we've talked a lot about it. It's a big part of our organization. It means a lot to us. It holds a special place in our heart, just because we've both had broken hearts because of it, I feel like. And that's very true. And I think a big reason why we advocate for cannabis so much is because cannabis has helped me open up. It's taken away that anxiety that didn't want to help me kind of tell my story or see my truth or be present in my truth, because it's hard to tell a story and not try to accept some type of responsibility or guilt for what somebody else did to you. And I think we haven't really seen too much of it yet, but there are, there's different groups, but Balanced Veterans is huge when it comes to this. And we really are trying to facilitate, healthy spaces for us to be able to meet up and talk about these things and utilize cannabis just as a form of healing. I mean, we want to lead, hopefully in the future, we want to lead a cannabis retreat that would be definitely PTSD focused, PTS focused, but also MST focused. And have, a guy's one and have a woman's one, because, MST happens a lot more than people would like to, unfortunately, accept on both sides. So I think that's huge, and we're definitely working towards that. It's taking up, I mean, it's just, it's hard. Like, we're figuring ourselves out too. PTS is just coming out. So everything takes time to process. But I think that now that a lot of people are coming out with their stories, it's helping us try to form different paths to, to help people facilitate their own journey to healing with cannabis.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Julia. I know Ron just recently shared some of his experiences on a podcast that he was a guest on. And, I've known Ron for a long time, but, this is something new that I learned about him. I'm thankful that I did not have a personal experience with military sexual trauma, but I was a sexual assault victim advocate and helped run the sexual assault program for NSA Bethesda. And so that is a big thing, and not just within the veteran community, but so much light is brought to it within the veteran community. But everyone that's experienced everywhere in those statistics that Hillary, I think, someone shared here in the chat, of all those people who have experienced sexual assault and the symptoms of post-traumatic stress that they experience. And cannabis does help. It really does. Anything else that any one of the panelists wanted to share real quick? Andrea, Chloe, Stephen?
Well, I just wanted to say something earlier about what Stephen shared when we talked about the jobs in dispensaries and just kind of in the cannabis industry should be for veterans. If anyone wants to talk more about social equity points or, how to take advantage of this new perspective, kind of they're trying to right the wrongs of the war on drugs, but I'm available for that, and I'll drop my information in the chat just for anybody that wants to talk about some of the social equity programs that are popping up in various jurisdictions.
Awesome, thanks, Chloe. And I see in the bio that they provided, you're the chair-elect for the National Bar Association of Young Lawyers. What is that looking like for you here in the future, and how are you going to take that to your advantage?
Yeah, so our organization represents about 6,000 attorneys of color. They are within their first 10 years of practice or under 40 years old, whichever is more inclusive, in a partnership with Airbnb that we just did this year. It'll launch under my bar year. So I'll be sworn in about 3.5 weeks. And so after that, we will start this partnership where we're going to be doing some expungement work. And so putting on virtual clinics and doing expungement work for anything cannabis related. If you have something on your record that affects your ability for housing, for student loans, for employment. So that's something that the National Bar is really taking a stab at, like wants to be a partner with firsthand. And so Airbnb, they decided to come on board with us and to help us with that, because their whole mission is making people be a part of a community. And so we said, what better way to get people back into the community than to take off this, negative, like punitive thing that's on their records. We can bring them back into the fold, even if it's felons voting rights, like restoration of your voting rights. So just so many things are affected by having this stigma of a cannabis offense or a drug offense on your record. And that's something that we are going to take on.
That is such important work. Thank you, Chloe. Really looking forward to connecting.
Andrea, if you can toot your horn for a few seconds here.
Sure, I can play the horn. Yeah, I mean, I guess from my perspective, like one thing I just want to make sure everyone is aware of here is just what we are doing to progress the industry. And that's and not only obviously talking about access to cannabis, but how you can use cannabis and remain functional. I think one thing we didn't even discuss that I kind of thought a little bit about today was how you can use cannabis at work and stay functional and not be impaired. And so there's a lot of work, like I said, going into those minor cannabinoids to see how we can explore opportunities to address pain, sleep, energy, focus, especially at GTI. But there's a lot of emphasis going into that, and being able to help. Even one other thing, just another technology thing is time release. So when you are sleeping, you can help with those nightmares throughout the entire evening and have a time release response from the medicine. So lots of fun things and exciting. And I'm really honored to be able to participate on this forum and be able to help service, the veteran community. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Andrea. Stephen, last but not least, Marines are always last, that. But we love you the most.
For sure. I guess right now, the biggest thing I'm doing is obviously my research and my thesis that I was talking about. But I'm also the co-founder of the Illinois Minority Growers Association. And we are working to give opportunities through education, equity, and empowerment to those communities here in Chicago, which, you know, people often really just hear it's the most violent place, but people don't realize how many veterans there are that are actually living here. And the Montford Point Marines actually headquarters is here. So anyway, through our association, we are trying to go to those communities that are disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs and increase opportunities in those areas. And what we are finding is that a lot of those areas are veterans who maybe just kind of feel like nobody's going to help me anymore. I'm just stuck in this community. So part of what we're doing with Illinois Minority Growers Association is going to those communities, finding those veterans and really trying to help them every way possible. We're new, we're young, but we have a lot of connections here in Chicago. A lot of people don't know, but Chicago has 3 of the 5 biggest cannabis companies in the United States. So we're really trying to work directly with them and just from the community standpoint, go past the legislation and the government, figure out what's legal, what can we do now, and just go straight to those companies and try to work with them. So.
That's awesome. Thanks, Stephen. That's really important work that you're doing out there, and I wish you all the best there. There's a couple questions, just looking through the chat here. There was one question that we had about how to go about the various sectors of the industry, so getting ready to retire and wanting to get into the industry. What's the best way to get into the industry and to be able to contribute?
I'll start. So I think for a lot of us, like, this is a burgeoning industry, it's new. And so you kind of have to find what you do well. And then whatever it is that you do well, you can transition that or pivot that into the cannabis industry. So even if you're not someone who anticipates being kind of plant facing or plant touching, what are some of the auxiliary things that are necessary within the cannabis industry? Do you understand logistics? Do you understand operations? Do you have a background in retail? Like, all of those things are necessary within the cannabis industry. And so kind of identify what your skill set is, what you do well, and then start making those outreaches, those connections on LinkedIn, attending events like this, connecting with all the panelists, and just kind of put yourself in the middle of everything as a player and let us know what you do well.
Yeah, that's a great point. Stephen, did you have something to add to that?
No, I was just going to say, it's kind of a loaded question because it varies so greatly state to state. But I would say one thing that you can do is you can educate yourself in this digital age. And through educating yourself based on your local laws and restrictions, you could really put yourself at the forefront of what's going to be federally legal eventually, whether they like it or not. So based on wherever you are, just kind of pay attention to the industry because they owe you a part of that industry. And as you pay attention as a veteran, you'll find out you're more directly aligned, even if you've been anti-cannabis your entire life, because we all have the same goal, and that's to get that number of 22 a day to 0.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and like Chloe said, find what you're good at, because this industry is just like any other industry. We need people in marketing. We need people in research and development. We need access to the equipment. We need people who are good with social media, administrative. I know Balanced Veterans Network, we're taking off and we're getting there. But, we need that help also for our ambassadors and volunteers. And you don't have to know anything about cannabis to be able to help and to be in the industry and get connected there. There's another question here that I wanted to see if anyone had a good answer to. If there's a referral service for psychiatrists and therapists who will work with their clients to understand how to benefit from THC and cannabis. So if there's a type of referral service yet, or where would you send an existing psychiatrist or therapist to learn more?
I mean, I'll just say that's a really hard one, because I don't have a place where I could send a doctor and say, hey, like, this is a good place to go get all of the information that you need. Going into more probably I don't know, different conferences potentially, like maybe more cannabis focused ones that are medical. There is a ton of people advocating for education out there. So It's just a matter of, I think, looking and finding those different opportunities. I'll take a look after this too, and I'll send it to Amor to send out to everybody. I don't, like I said, know specifically anything, but I can, I mean, at least you can self-educate with resources. I definitely can supply some information on that, on self-education. But really, it's as far as if you're a therapist and being, I see Leafly, just make sure you're checking your references. They do a pretty good job. They have a pretty good scientific writer, I think. And so just, I can also send out some reference material as well, like different journals that you can access. If you are a therapist, you probably typically are staying in touch with like sleep journals and things like that. And so there is definitely a lot of cannabis movement in the education space. More and more people are doing research. The DEA just actually announced that they're going to stop the monopolization that they have over THC research. So people like myself or anybody else, like academic industry, they can actually do THC research, and grow THC, process THC, but not for sale, but only for research. There's no direct line there, lane and avenue to get there, but they did announce that they're going to allow that. So hopefully there'll be more and more resources coming out. I mean, I feel like every 1 month equals 1 year in cannabis, and it's just like rapidly changing. And so I'll do what I can to see what, there you go. There's a good resource, Hillary. But I'll see what I can put out to Amor before she sends out an email.
I wanted to say, just while we're on that topic, the American Cannabinoid Clinic, that's a real thing now. And they have doctors that are certified cannabinologists, and they specialize in endocannabinoid deficiency and endocannabinoid hyperactivity. And they're actually looking at the fact that most of our diseases come from an imbalance in the endocannabinoid system. And they're not, the diseases are what we're essentially seeing the end product of an imbalance of it. So there are doctors, please, because yesterday when I was on this AMVETS call, there were 40 doctors that were screaming about their research and the fact that no one really had heard anything they were preaching. So the American Cannabinoids Clinic, these are doctors, some of them that have been doing this for 20 years, working with patients, but also trying to work with politicians. So it's a really good resource.
Great, thanks guys. And Melissa, thanks for sharing there in the chat. Talk about radical healthcare for doctors and nurses and the American Cannabis Nurse Association for nurses. I know I work with a lot of nurses and they're afraid of even talking about cannabis because of worrying about losing their license. Are there any other questions from anyone who joined us this evening? I'm going to put it while we're waiting in the chat here. I'm going to put in a plug for Balanced Veterans Network. For all the veterans out there, we do have our own website, a brand new website that we just launched, in our own private secure community where you can chat with other veterans. Stephen, people like you who are trying to learn more about cultivating. We have lots of people in there who are growing all over the country and can give you lots of tips and advice. There's areas in there, a men's only area, a women's only area to talk about things like military sexual trauma. In the men's area, I know there's like a sexual dysfunction, erectile dysfunction type area. We focus on spirituality, mental health, and wellness, and lots of ideas to help become more balanced, because we were founded because we are unbalanced, and we're seeking that balance in our lives. But things from like I started beekeeping with Hives for Heroes, yoga, meditation, exercise, just growing plants. That's what we're here for, and using cannabis as well. And so check out our website, balancedveterans.com or bvn.vet. We're also on social media, Balanced Veterans. And for anyone who is into cannabis use or wants more information, we do have a private Facebook group, Operation 1620. But again, there's a lot of censorship on Facebook, and so that's why we've created this network. So you can visit it on our website. We also have some pretty cool gear. Ron's sporting a shirt. I've got one. I saw Eric was on earlier there as well. So check it out for veterans or veteran caregivers as well. But I want to thank all of our panelists for each of their contributions. Chloe, Stephen, Andrea, Julia, Ron, thank you all so much for being here this evening. And Amor, thank you so much for hosting it this evening, and the Illinois Women in Cannabis. Thank you so much for this platform. I really appreciate the opportunity here tonight.
Our doors always open. We're honored to have you and be part of the family. I look forward to our next discussion later on in July. I'll be sure to send the email reminder to everyone. You will have an email from me tomorrow with a link to the recording and contact information for our guests, and continuing to encourage people to support, to learn, to listen, and to join in supporting our veteran community. Thank you so much for this incredible time with us. I can't say anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Amor.
Some more.